Welcome and happy Thanksgiving. Tomorrow we gather with family and friends to give thanks for blessings we often take for granted. The food before us, the roof over our heads, the precious children around the table. Sadly, as a result of war and disease, millions of children across the world have lost their homes, their health, even a parent, and sometimes two. Citing Ebola and conflicts in the Mideast and Africa, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, reports it has never before had to help children in so many major emergencies all at once. We'll address this in a moment. Also on the program today, the innovative People's Theater Project, which explores tough urban issues like gentrification by putting its audience center stage. And a couple of guests have a message for Mayor de Blasio: more Latinos in city government, please. And towards the end of the hour, we will meet Crystal Valentine, the 2015 Youth Poet Laureate of New York City. But first, vulnerable children in Western Africa. At least 3,700 children have been orphaned by Ebola there. And in the Middle East, more than 1.5 million kids are living as refugees from the war in Syria. Many groups are helping in these and other emergencies, but for vulnerable children, UNICEF is central. It has the reputation of delivering life-saving supplies fast, immunizing kids in great numbers, opening portable schools almost instantly anywhere, and caring for children separated from their families. But is the UN overwhelmed by the need, and how might we help on this week of the Day of Thanks? Joining us, Afshan Khan, Director of UNICEF's Office of Emergency Programs, and via Skype from Beirut, Luciano Calestini, UNICEF's Deputy Representative in Lebanon. We'll connect with a Liberian representative as well shortly. Welcome to both of you, Afshan and Luciano. Afshan, some people know UNICEF, Halloween, collecting pennies and other change as they trick or treat. But am I right that UNICEF gets no money from the actual United Nations?
UNICEF is 100% voluntary funded, and a lot of our funding relies, almost half of it, on what is called the National Committee family. So when you spoke about trick-or-treating, and the U.S. fund for UNICEF is one of the oldest and longest-serving arms of the UN in terms of UNICEF for raising funds for kids. And through trick-or-treat alone, UNICEF has raised more than $170 million over the last 60 years. The other half of our funding comes mainly from government donors, so 50% of that is governments who want to support the rights and needs of children, particularly children in emergencies. So we have really worked towards providing basic services like education, healthcare, water and sanitation, simple life-saving interventions like immunization at the onset of a crisis. And that's a big part of what UNICEF does.
So let's meet your fellow guest who's got an on-the-ground story for us of some of UNICEF's work. Luciano in Lebanon, hello from New York.
Good evening, how are you?
Good. Tell us about your work there and how the Syrian war is affecting you.
Well, I mean, this war is nothing short of an abomination for children. These children have lived through close to now 4 years of absolute horror. The situation in Lebanon is that we now have more than 1 million refugees in a country of only just over 4 million people, meaning that 1 in 5 people you see on the street is a Syrian refugee, and 80% of those refugees are women and children. So that means that there are more than 600,000 Syrian refugee children in a country that even before this crisis was fragile and poor. And the burden that is placed on Lebanese institutions who are desperately trying to respond to the needs created by having an extra 20% of people in the country is extraordinary and a testament to the resilience of Lebanon. But nonetheless, the needs are enormous. There are, despite all our collective efforts, there are many thousands of children who remain without any forms of support, and this has to end.
And when you talk about refugees and that staggering number of Syrian refugees in Lebanon, people here will probably conjure up an image right away of refugee camps, tents, and things like that. But that's not actually how it works in Lebanon, I've understood. Is that correct?
We have a very unique and very difficult situation in Lebanon where there is not one single formal refugee camp, quote unquote. Instead, more and more refugees, as the accommodation options, the shelter options for refugee families become more and more limited, there are now greater numbers of refugees who are staying in places that we call informal settlements, which are camps by any other name, but they're unmanaged. And there are now close to 1,500 of these settlements. Some have as little as 10 families, some have as many as 200 families, and they're found in literally every municipality in the country. And it's a very logistically difficult operation to try and reach all of these children who are so dispersed. But as we said before, to ensure that there is access to services to all of these children is a huge challenge.
How are they surviving then, and how helpful or not is the Lebanese government?
I mean, the Lebanese government has been extraordinary up to date. The borders have remained open, schools have remained open, hospitals have remained open. But the reality is that to sustain a response for so long, for so many people, with a public sector that was already under great pressure and have been historically underinvested in, is a massive challenge. So the international community's support to those Lebanese institutions is vital. Children, of course, don't live in sectors, so we can't simply say that one sector is more important than another. So a child has to receive the full package to remain safe and protected. That means safe water, that means immunization, that means access to education, that means protection from abuse and exploitation. So it really is a huge collective team effort with more than 75 humanitarian and development organizations, half a dozen key government ministries all working together to reach as many children as possible.
Now, stay there because I want to ask you some more questions in a minute, including whether you can help children in Syria itself. But Afshan, you brought a little prop here to show us one way the children keep getting educated during a crisis like this, and it's called School in a Box. We're going to show this, we are showing this to our viewers at home right now. Describe School in a Box. How could that be?
School in a Box is one of the things we came up with as a quick way to get children into some form of safe learning for a sudden onset crisis. So in situations where there's a natural disaster or sudden conflict, this box has a selection of items. It serves 40 students. It's got a clock, maps, wooden blocks, teaching instruments such as books, pens, and it can really help kids learn in a space that's safe, and number charts, multiplication tables, alphabet tables. And the great advantages of this is within 72 hours, you can actually set up a small school for kids. It's an aluminum box. It has a part of the lid can be used as a blackboard. And it really, for UNICEF, it's that sudden safe space to bring kids together and to help in a learning environment. And the rapidity of that is what's key. So we've had more than, it costs $219, and it's probably one of the biggest items we use for quick disaster response and emergencies. And
that one box that we saw recorded earlier sitting on this very table sets up a classroom for 40 students? 40 students, one teacher, and you know, the U.S. fund and the support they've provided for us getting those School in a Box out immediately in a crisis is crucial. I think what we've seen in other contexts, like the one that Luciano is describing, is where kids are actually going to schools that are set up by government. But until those schools are able to be restored and put back into place, that School in a Box can be the difference for a child between no school for 6 months and a safe learning space and environment. Let's look at some of the School in a Box's contents. What are we seeing here? Chalk, rulers, slide rulers, alphabet tables, notebooks, pens, pencils, simple things that kids here might take for granted are the difference between nothing for kids in many of these countries and some learning tools that can help them keep up their ABCs and their multiplication. For 40 kids, you said before, at least they'll know a little math, it looks like. They'll know a lot of math, hopefully. Luciano, back to you. can you help children inside Syria, or is it too dangerous to go in there?
Absolutely. I mean, UNICEF has more than 100 people in Syria, including Damascus, but also 3 or 4 field offices all around the country. So without question, the operating environment in Syria is by far the most difficult of all the countries affected in this crisis. But UNICEF is certainly operating itself and with partners and reaching hundreds of thousands of children, as is the case in Iraq, in Turkey, also in Egypt. So there are offices in every affected country operating under the good grace of incredibly generous donors who have maintained support over the past 3 years, and we call on that support to continue as long as this crisis does.
Luciano, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck there.
Thank you.
Afshan, you need the cooperation of the local governments in order for UNICEF to do its work anywhere. Luciano was talking about the Lebanese government being quite cooperative. But a lot of the countries that UNICEF has to work in, I think it's fair to say, they have to work in partly because the governments are inept or corrupt. So how much of a problem does this often become?
I think for UNICEF, the ability that we're able to focus on children has allowed us to work with all forms of government and all forms of different actors, because UNICEF is also active in conflict zones. So in many situations, we'll be working with local administration who want to see their kids in school. They want to see basic education running. They want to see water and sanitation services provided. They know how critical things like immunization and basic health care are for survival of their next generation. So we are able to collaborate despite all difficult odds, and we've seen really the emphasis of local government and communities often providing the best support and partnership for us to work with. And that really for us is crucial in terms of access to clean water for kids, health care, or education.
Another example, let's turn to Africa. Joining the conversation now, Sheldon Yett, UNICEF's representative for Liberia, which has recorded nearly 3,000 confirmed and suspected Ebola deaths. At the moment, Mr. Yett is in Accra, in Ghana. Hello, Sheldon Yett. Hello from New York.
Good to be with you.
Tell us how UNICEF is dealing with the Ebola crisis.
Well, first and foremost, we're working under the leadership of the government of Liberia, and we're working very hard to ensure that all of our activities are coordinated very closely with those of our partner agencies, our sister agencies. We're working to ensure that cases are identified and that they're treated, and most importantly, that we're working with communities themselves.
That they work with UNICEF itself. Have you been going into the affected areas and dealing with sick people, and you have to wear those hazardous substance suits, or not really like the medical workers?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that it is safe to work and to travel around Liberia only when you're working directly with people who are suspected of having the disease. It's necessary to wear that full coverage of the personal protective equipment. So we're getting our supplies up there, we're working together, we're training health workers, we're getting thousands and thousands of tons of infection control material there. We are making sure that cases are identified and communities know what to do, working door to door with each of individual households that are affected.
Tell us about the adolescent girls going around West Point, Liberia. That's not West Point, New York. That's West Point, Liberia, in a prevention effort in coordination with you. Tell us about that.
Yes, very, very distinct difference between West Point, New York and West Point, Liberia. One is a very wealthy community, and the community in Liberia is extremely poor, made up of lots of rusted shacks. And UNICEF had been working in this community for many years, particularly dealing with children who are affected by sexual violence. It's one of the most violent of communities in the country. And so, given that we already had these inroads with the community, we had people in place, we told our partners there, our partners, which are mostly adolescent girls, had been training their friends, their peers, on how to keep safe from sexual violence. And they saw their friends dying. They wanted to do something else. They wanted to make sure they could keep their friends safe. They started training their friends and working with their friends on how to stay safe and keep their families safe from Ebola. We went in there, gave them additional supplies, additional training, and they've gone through the community like wildfire, talking to everybody, knocking on every door, making sure that kids and other people knew exactly what to do. They're a lot more powerful as voices and as communicators than any public health official could possibly be, coming in from the Ministry of Health or UNICEF, for that matter. Peer education really works. That's one thing we've learned from other diseases that we've dealt with.
Afshan, when we talk about child health, I remember when I first started on my radio show 25 years ago, I used to talk about child deaths from malnutrition-related causes and cite a UNICEF statistic that was, I think it was more than 12 million children a year, 10, 20,000 children a day dying from malnutrition-related causes.
Yeah.
And I think you've done pretty well at cutting that number, haven't you, over time?
I think UNICEF has worked with partners to cut the number of kids that have died since 1990 by 100 million. So that's almost halving the mortality rate for kids. And that's probably the biggest untold success story of this generation. And it's been done by simple things, like vaccines for measles, through dealing with pneumonia, diarrhea, simple ORS sachets, ready-to-use therapeutic foods for malnutrition that you talked about. So what I really want to make clear here is that, you know, often we think this is a super expensive, difficult thing to do. The simple donations that are made, to the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, really can make the difference in really cutting in half the mortality rates. There's 24 million newborns that have survived as a result of these interventions. Simple things like a bed net for malaria can really make a difference. So I think sometimes that story and the power of that story and what it's done for children, for families, is really a story that needs to be told more and more.
It's really one of the biggest stories in the world and one of the most untold. I agree with you. And Sheldon, another story from Liberia, survivors of Ebola, helping the children who've been orphaned by the disease. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a disease, as you know, that piggybacks on the most basic of human emotions. People want to reach out and touch someone who's sick. And you can't do that, of course, safely. The only person who can do that is a survivor. Survivors are immune, at least in the short term, from getting the disease. So they're the perfect partners of ours. We're working with them in two very distinct ways. One, they're ambassadors for us of getting early care. One of the issues is that people see their family members going into Ebola treatment units and they don't hear back from them. Now that we have more and more survivors coming back to the communities, they're the best ambassadors for people going in and seeking treatment. They can tell people what happens there, and that's happening. They're also being used by UNICEF and our partners to provide support to children who are contacts or people who've had the disease, because they can safely interact with these kids and not risk getting sick themselves. And they can provide that human touch that is so important that kids everywhere need.
Sheldon, thank you very much. And Afshan, we hear if one person is beheaded in Iraq, we hear if one person gets Ebola in Washington Heights, we don't hear about the 100 million children saved over the last 25 years. How can people give to UNICEF and help UNICEF on this Thanksgiving week if they are so moved?
Well, the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, www.uniceffund.org, is the best way you can give. We have online giving. I think that's it can make a huge difference. And it's not just about the kids we've saved, but it's the potential for the kids we can save. You don't hear about the more than 500,000 kids who are at the risk of starvation in South Sudan. There's incredible commitments that can be made with funds provided to UNICEF.
I'm being told that the website is unicefusa.org. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so just the correct website, UNICEF USA change.org. You'll see it on your screen. And thank you very much for your work and for coming.
Thank you.
There are lots of ideas around for tackling income inequality and surviving the wave of rising rents that can price people out of the neighborhoods they grew up in. But it's not all economics. Gentrification is nuanced, involving human questions that defy simple answers. For some creative New Yorkers, these experiences are best addressed on stage. That's how it played out last weekend at a production of the People's Theater Project in Manhattan's Washington Heights neighborhood. Here's a short clip of the interactive stage play entitled Pardon Our Appearance.
Neighborhood has changed so much. I'm so excited for coming back. Jersey was getting so old. I mean, we belong here.
Sí, me encanta volver a regresar a Washington Heights. Es un lugar muy bonito para visitar.
I know. Look, they have Chipotle now. There's Starbucks here. There's all these places. Forget about, mommy, papi, grocery stores. This is where it's at right now.
Exacto. Claro que sí. Pero vamos a tomar un café. Okay.
Yeah, let's go to Starbucks.
No. Al café de Malecón.
I know, the Malecón, that's where, other Latinos go.
Pero ven acá, ¿cómo que latino? ¿Tú no eres latina?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm another kind of Latina. Okay, we gotta go to Starbucks.
No. Un café del Malecón.
Listen, this neighborhood has changed. Look, there's a white lady on it. Let's have the white lady.
No, let's have the white lady del Malecón. Y este es el café.
Excuse me. Hi, can I take a second of your time?
I'm already a registered voter.
Oh, no! I'm sorry, girl. Ten cuidado, don't mention
Es que ella se va y no quiere. No quiere hablar con
No, we're not here to ask you to register votes because we're moving into the neighborhood. Our parents left an apartment behind for us, and we just want to, talk to locals and see what's up with Washington Heights now.
Okay. Well, you're here, and you can see there's Starbucks, Malecón, Chipotle, Cubans, all sorts of things. And there's the express train, there's lots of parks, there's a farmer's market, people are pretty nice, so, I don't have any complaints.
Oh, ¿y tu cafecito? ¿Dónde lo compraste?
Oh, Malecón.
Oh, te lo dije. Todo el mundo compra café en Malecón.
Yeah, I know, but still, we got...
Oye, ¿y cómo es el barrio?
Wait, don't call it a barrio, it's a neighborhood.
No. ¿Cómo es el barrio?
Neighborhood.
Here to further explain what we just saw, People's Theater Project co-executive and director, Mino Lora, and an actor who has risen in the ranks to become a kind of co-host of these shows, Esdras Santana. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much.
So Mina, first, and we'll talk about the clip in a minute, but what is the People's Theater Project? Tell our viewers more.
So People's Theater Project is an arts and social justice organization based uptown. We believe that everybody has a voice and that we all have our stories to share. And we see theater really as a very powerful tool to bring people together, to raise awareness around the issues that are important to us, and to create a positive dialogue around these very difficult issues to grasp. So we work with children, teens, and adults. We work in school. We work in the evenings on Saturdays, where we create original plays around the issues that are pressing for the community. So housing and immigration and deportations and gentrification, as was this year.
And so, for example, in that clip, I mean, you put questions of race really right out there, and income right out there, right there on stage. You want to talk about that clip?
Yes. So in this clip, so I should say, so all of the stories that were put on the play in that moment as well are based on real life experiences. So what we saw there was two young Latinas who haven't grown up in New York, but they have an apartment there that has belonged to their family. And for 30 years, a woman has been subletting from them, or 40 years. And this we know this woman, that was her story. And then suddenly the neighborhood's changing. They want to move back to the Heights, and this woman is now evicted. Or, doesn't realize if she has rights or not, but she has for 40 years paid rent, and suddenly the neighborhood's up and coming, but she's on Social Security. She can't afford the rents in Washington Heights. So right now, this woman in her 70s in Washington Heights is couch sitting for friends until she can afford to go back to her country.
Couch sitting.
Yeah.
Esdras, were you there over the weekend when that was shown?
Yes, I was part of the production. I was co-hosting and facilitating with Mino, and it was a very powerful experience. Part of what we do, our roles are, we are the jokers, and jokers sort of have a big responsibility to engage the audience in wanting to come up and replace the people having the problem in the play and acting out what their idea of the solution is. And so we sort of engage that by warming up the audience. We get them to play theater games. And these games are sort of, we say that they demechanize the audience so that their brain can receive and think differently.
It's an ancient tradition, right? The court jester.
Yes.
Or if you've ever been to a game show or the Tonight Show taping or anything like that, there's a comic who comes out first, warms up the audience, gets everybody loosey-goosey, and then they're ready to really engage.
Yes, except we have really serious topics to discuss.
Yes.
And so then we, you know, the idea is people want to tell us their idea. They don't often want to show us. And so we really have to try and, hey, don't tell us, come and show us, act it out. Tell us what moment in the scene you want to enter. Replace our protagonist and show us your idea.
Really?
And then they start to do this. They enter the scene, and then we sort of let this go on, and we have to figure out, okay, when do we stop this?
All right, I think we have an example in another clip of exactly that kind of thing. Let's take a look.
Looks like everything is in order.
Yeah, we're all set to move in. I mean, we're ready.
Yeah, we're getting married in 2 weeks, and we can't wait to move to Hudson Heights.
You know, I don't think you really belong here.
No, we do. I mean,
You don't want to live here.
yes, we do. We've been looking for an apartment forever. I mean, literally forever.
You know, this is an up-and-coming neighborhood. You know, we're trying to get away from having the working class here in this
I
neighborhood.
can't believe I'm
I'm
here.
not saying. I don't understand what you're saying. I grew up here, so
But I don't think you feel at home here. You grew up here, you said?
Yes,
But
we
it's,
both did
But
actually.
it's not the same as it was 20 years ago.
Oh, really?
You know, you're right. People used to be a lot nicer.
Maybe you should try the Bronx.
Ella nos mandó a vivir al Bronx.
Excuse me, I have other appointments. We're finished.
Yes, we do.
So our income is great, is above the national average. We have notes here from our other tenants, so from our other landlords, so you can see we've paid our rent on time. We're excellent tenants. My husband he's taking the sergeant's test, so we're gonna make more money.
It looks good.
I know, we're so excited. You know, we grew up in the neighborhood. We see it's up and coming.
Well, you know it's not the same as it was 20 years ago.
No, it's getting better, and so are we. I remember when we started as little kids, our parents didn't know English, and now we're professionals. I went to CW Post, and he went to Columbia. So this is exactly where we belong, in an up-and-coming neighborhood.
Okay.
Surprise ending, we're gentrifiers too.
Yeah.
Now, what were we seeing there? Were those all audience members or some of them were cast members?
So the actor playing the landlord, in the first section of it, it's how the scene was played as part of the play. And then when the audience member came in, she was the one who played kind of the one who was interacting the most with the landlord. So she came in when we presented, as Esdras said, so what would you do in that situation? This person was clearly discriminated against. She was, for whatever reason, economic reasons, racial reasons. There's a reason this landlord now in Washington Heights does not want a cop and a teacher living here. So she came in, and her tactic that she used, and we had a few different ones throughout the evening, some more aggressive, but hers was to really play the part of, yes, I am educated, yes, I am Latina, and yes, I can be both,
Yes.
and yes, I do qualify, and
Yes.
just was very persistent.
So what do you mean some tactics more aggressive?
So what we asked the audience is really to rehearse for real life, right? We really asked them, as Esdras mentioned, to come on stage and try something, try a tactic, try a way of dealing with the situation that will change the outcome. So another person who came up from the audience in a different scene was just, really was like, you are a racist, I'm sending you to court, I'm bringing a lawyer. And that scared the landlord. She was still kind of holding her place, but we saw a reaction. So then, as an audience, as a group of 200 people there, we're like, okay, so now we know if we try this, that can happen, so that's a possible option, or this is a possible option, and then all the cousins are coming, and I think she said, I'll bring my 3 lawyers that are cousins, and we are going to harass your office. So suddenly we have all these tools that we, in this safe place of theater, are able to put into practice, to listen, to learn from, so that when we or our neighbors or our friends or our abuelas encounter this in real life, we now know what to do.
So people leave not only entertained, but more empowered than
Yes.
they arrived, hopefully.
Yes, because we are not there to give them advice. We are there to discover the solutions and options together. So that's what we do with the audience.
Was the audience there diverse in the sense of there were, some of the newer white residents of the neighborhood as well as some of the older Latino residents of the neighborhood, et cetera?
Yes, there were, and that was amazing to see. And part of the reason why we decided to talk about the topic of gentrification is because we saw a lot of online discussions that were negative, and we saw both groups of people sort of just antagonizing each other on the internet. And so we decided to put this on stage because we wanted a way to bring a way to the community to discuss it in a way that was less negative, more positive, and to show that the two groups can come together in the same room and have a positive discussion and listen to each other.
That's
It was
great.
a very powerful weekend.
How did you get into this? And when you were doing more of the acting, what meaning did that have for you?
Well, when I was doing the acting, which I did for the past 3 years, I got into it because I am an actor, and a friend who is a fellow actor, he participated with them. Matt Higgins is his name. And so he invited me in because we're always talking about stories and things, and this is really about storytelling. And so I joined, and the first year that I joined, I told a story on stage about my brother's deportation and about this court hearing that we had. And I was a little kid, and the judge sort of glazed over me and didn't listen to me. He said, "Oh, she's the little sister, she doesn't need to speak." And that really stuck with me for a long, long time. And so I told that story on stage, and it became a topic of immigration, but also how children aren't heard. So that's a story I told.
Yeah, so many perspectives coming out, stories
Right.
told and untold. So Mina, as we close up, just tell people where else you're going to be. This isn't just a Washington Heights thing, right?
Yeah, it isn't. I mean, that's our home, but we understand that this complex issue, we don't want to, it's not about villainizing, as Esther says, it's really about coming together and figuring, okay, so how do we move forward? How do we come together and find our own responsibilities? So our goal is to take this play, Pardon Our Appearance, and do a 5-borough tour in the spring of 2015. So right now we're looking for partner organizations around Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx and Staten Island, and we're in communication with some, but if anybody or any local groups and organizing groups, I mean, we want to take it out and continue this enriching dialogue in this theatrical way all over the city.
All right, People's Theater Project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And up next, a message for the mayor. Here are some numbers that some say are an outrage. Latinos are a third of New York City's population, but make up only 12% of the government heads, the agency heads, appointed by Mayor Bill de Blasio. Some new light shed by the Latino Institute for National Policy shows Latinos tend to be concentrated in just 3 of 39 total city agencies. There's no city agency with a predominantly Latino staff, compared to 17 with mostly black staffs and 23 mostly made up of whites. The mayor has recently taken some action. Here to discuss, Ramon Jimenez, attorney and former Attorney General candidate, and Lucky Rivera, founder of Boricuas for Positive Change. Welcome, both of you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us on, Brian.
Do you think the mayor is surprised by you guys and others raising this issue? He would probably think, oh, I'm the diversity mayor, I'm the income inequality mayor. You're laughing.
I'm laughing, yeah. Diversity, it doesn't reflect on, like you said, 12%. That's a joke. That's a joke for anyone. If you got 29%, a third, 29% voted for you, I mean, it should reflect on the folks you hire. If you talk the talk, you should walk the walk or talk the talk, like they say. He's not doing it.
Was Bloomberg better?
Well, we're not comparing de Blasio to Bloomberg, because de Blasio came in riding a horse that said diversity, riding a horse that said inclusion, riding a horse that said representation. So we're comparing de Blasio to his record or his promises as a progressive mayor. And based on those promises, we find that he's really, really fallen short. And as each month passes by, less and less of the appointments happen to be Latino. We started out with the appointments when he first began of 33%, and now we've gone down to 12% total. So we believe he's falling short.
Falling short. Does this just become about numbers of appointees in the administration, or does it extend to larger policy? Because again, he would probably say, he's the inequality mayor, he's taking steps, be it endorsing paid sick leave and all other kinds of things that benefit working class New Yorkers, which unfortunately are overrepresented in both the black and Latino communities.
Well, we think that most of the agencies continue to be underrepresented in terms of Latinos, and making policy in like agencies, city agencies is very important. And these city agencies many times serve 30 to 40% population of Latinos. And when you have no Latinos, no one who understands the culture, who understands the language, there's serious problems. And again, we're not comparing him to to Giuliani or to Bloomberg. De Blasio came in with a new agenda, and it was based on diversity and having his administration reflect the city that we live in, and he's falling short on that.
The mayor recently did appoint 3 Latinos to the 9-person Human Rights Commission. Do you think that was a response to you and other members of your coalition speaking up? Do you think that was on the table anyway? Is it something that helps satisfy the problem?
Well, it doesn't help satisfy the problem. Yeah, 3 appointees, that's just a drop in the bucket. As far as yes, we had over 250 people at City Hall, and these different organizations. You got a police organization, you got lawyers, you got doctors, you got teachers. These are all Latino and all well-qualified people. I mean, de Blasio got problems. If it doesn't change, he has problems with the Latino community.
How about the city council speaker, Melissa Mark Viverito, Latina? A new Quinnipiac poll showed that just 42% of Latinos approved of her job performance. And I'm curious why, in her case, that's not 62%, 72%, 82%. Any idea?
Well, I certainly have some idea. Well, first of all, de Blasio didn't appoint Viverito. Viverito was chosen by the city council, so we don't consider her to be
independent of the mayor.
Yeah, we don't consider her to be an appointment.
Correct.
Second of all, sometimes, Brian, this gentleman's organization helped get Melissa Mark Viverito elected.
Volunteers.
She only got 38% of the vote. She had a primary with 4 other people, Brian. But since she's
for her city council seat.
That's right, for her city council seat. She had to get the city council seat to become city council president. once she got the seat and she became president, some of us are beginning to feel that sometimes when you join the clubhouse, Brian, you no longer relate to those people at the bottom who got you there. You become
trying to fight the clubhouse. So
exactly,
so
you become
what's
part
an
of the
example
clubhouse.
of that?
Well, many of us were very surprised at her great relationship with Ruben Diaz Jr., the borough president of the Bronx, Maria Carmen Arroyo, the city council member. These were people that went after her, ran candidates against her, wanted to oust her. And now she has and also with the group Miramal, with Rodriguez, with Ramirez and Miranda. In other words, for some reason, grassroots leaders, once they get power, tend to think that they have to go the typical way to get greater power. So that means become part of the clubhouse. You don't shout too much. You don't scream. You don't complain. And unfortunately, these 25 groups that asked for a meeting with Mark Viverito, this gentleman who helped get her elected. And you know what? She hasn't given us a meeting, Brian.
She hasn't given your group a meeting.
No.
The name of the group, Boricuas for Positive Image. Image. That Boricuas more or less Puerto Ricans, right?
Right.
Yeah, but that's one of the groups. It's 25 groups. It's Latinos for a Fair campaign.
Fair representation.
Fair representation for Latinos. It's more than that. You got different groups there, and lawyers and so on.
I guess I was just thinking about the terms positive image.
Yes,
Boricuas for a Positive Image, Brian, was the group that outed the Puerto Rican Day Parade and got the marketing agent ousted and a whole new board and took out the corruption in terms of the Puerto Rican Parade. They were leading organization.
That was that image problem.
Yes.
And now if you're not represented fairly in government, that's another kind of positive image problem.
Yeah, but you can
not
say
enough.
that, yes, 100%, not enough, yeah.
So what do the mayor's people say when you ask for a meeting?
Well, the mayor's people have not responded, although we have, again, a very wide coalition. And so we've told the mayor we're going to continue to protest, continue to raise the issue. We're even planning, if things don't happen in the future, we're planning a major Latino demonstration marching across the Brooklyn Bridge sometime in about 5 or 6 months. So in other words, we're telling the mayor he has to respond to what we're saying. In other words, these are community groups. We have the Latin Officers Police Association. We have so many different groups. And we, Brian, I expect that the mayor will very soon change his mind and decide to meet with us. I don't know if you remember David Dinkins. David Dinkins, in his first year, got overwhelming Latino vote. But the second time when he ran, same problem. One-term mayor.
One-term mayor. That's what de Blasio was looking at. De Blasio is looking at a one-term mayor if he don't take it serious. We're talking about 25 Latinos organizations, the prestigious and the biggest organizations in the city. 25, not Boricua for Positive Image, Latino organization. You're talking about 29% of the voters. We're telling him, we're going to be there. We're going to do. We want him to do the right thing. Not only that, on May 29th, you're going to have the biggest Latino march across the Brooklyn Bridge that you've ever seen in New York City. Okay, the biggest. We're working day and night. May 29th.
Oh, so you're giving him 6 months?
No, we're not giving him 6 months. If we get to May 29th, it's over. Because let me tell you, there's a big billionaire company that in 1992 disrespected hiring Latinos, all right? And they were the #1 seller in this city. Today they dropped down, and Coors is the #1 seller in this city. So if we Latinos get together for the respect, and we don't get the respect, and that's all we asking for is the respect, we want folks to call us the way they call other folks in the city.
And so before we're out of time, what equals that respect? Is it purely, at this point, fair representation of appointees within the city government, or are there other policy issues or whatever that also equal that respect?
Well, I think one, it's meeting with the group. Number two, it's beginning to make appointments which reflect the Latino population in New York City. It doesn't mean exactly you have to name, it's not about quotas, okay? But certainly 12% and 30% are just too, there's too much of a difference
Total
there.
disrespect.
So in other words, what we're saying is that put good Latino candidates in these positions meet with us, and with that we can move forward.
And how are the highest profile Latino appointees of this mayor doing? Right away, he named Gladys Carrion, Lillian Barrios Paoli, the school's chancellor, Carmen Farina. How are they doing?
I think Carmen Farina is doing a good job in spite of the charter schools complaining about her. I think she's raised some very good issues on the charter schools. And we would like more Latinos like Carmen Farina to be in other positions so they can do an equally good job as Carmen Farina and as Gladys Carrion has been doing.
Very good job.
All right. Well, we will leave it there. May 29th, the date is set. We'll circle it on the calendars and see what happens between now and then. And thank you very much for coming in and discussing the issues.
Thank you, Brian, but we expect to be meeting with de Blasio much sooner than May 29th.
Definitely.
Fact, we're waiting for the call. We're waiting for the call.
May 29th is too late. After that day, it's too late.
Each year since 2010, a young poet rises from the city streets and achieves a large literary honor. On October 30th, some of the best young poets of the 5 boroughs competed for the title New York City Youth Poet Laureate. The program is organized by Spoken Word NYC and the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Campaign finance? What's electoral politics got to do with poetry? We will find out from the 2015 New York City Youth Poet Laureate, Crystal Valentine, a junior at NYU. Welcome, Crystal.
Hi, nice to be here.
All right, I'll bite. What does campaign finance have to do with becoming the Youth Poet Laureate?
I think it has a lot to it has a lot to do with it, just because when reaching out to the youth, you know, why not have someone their age, you know, do it, and also talk in a language that they also communicate in. So for me, spoken word, I communicate through language, you know, through poetry, and I think that the youth will also understand that.
So you had to compete for this title,
yes,
partly by writing a poem intended to get people to vote, correct?
Yes.
And I understand you're going to read that poem for us.
I am.
We're all ears and eyes.
Sure, let me get it up right now. The poem that I'll be reading is called A Voter's Armageddon.
Armageddon, Voters
Yeah.
Armageddon.
Yeah, I figured I have to be drastic because these are drastic times, you know?
You can't get much more drastic than Armageddon.
You cannot, you cannot. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it right now. A voter's Armageddon. Maybe we're just waiting for the locusts to come. Maybe we're waiting for the whole world to set fire, for God to finally cleanse this melting pot, for a purer human race to rise from the ashes. Because obviously, the stakes aren't high enough. Obviously, college debt isn't high enough. High school dropout rates aren't high enough. Increased MetroCard fares aren't high enough. Obviously, Obama's signature on a $9 billion food stamp cut isn't enough. And America's attempt to exile an entire continent isn't enough. People being beheaded on national television just isn't enough. Maybe we're waiting for something ridiculous to happen. Like Miley Cyrus becoming the first female president, like racism being diagnosed as a mental illness, like police sirens becoming our national anthem. Obviously, we're waiting for something deadlier than rape culture and police brutality to split this world in half. Maybe politics aren't Armageddon enough for us, aren't spark enough for us, aren't call to action enough for us. This is a call to action, to rally, to revolt. And I know it's hard living in a society where we attend more funerals than birthday parties, and I know that you think that you're just another flame in an uncontainable inferno. And what does a flame know of voting anyway? And what's a vote to a burning democracy? And I think I just saw the rapture coming, and I know you think Obama will be just another god that has forsaken us. Just know that calling any man a god is the true Armageddon. Just know that your refusal to vote is the true Armageddon, so vote. Because when Armageddon does happen, it will look nothing like this.
Wow.
Thank you.
Very powerful.
Thank you.
So let's talk about a couple of the concepts in there. One line I picked up on, exiling an entire continent.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
When I say exiling an entire continent, I'm referring to Africa and the Ebola situation that's going on there. I personally think that it's a bit drastic. They're policing, you know, airfare, who can come in and out of Africa, who can go to Africa, who can't go to Africa. And it's basically like we are basically saying, Africa, we're not with you anymore. You're not essentially a part of this world anymore, so you're just gonna be by yourself, and we're not gonna let any of our citizens go over there, and anyone who dares come from Africa, who comes over to the United States, you know, we have to check them out and make sure that they're okay. And I understand that there's a crisis going on, and I understand that it's a serious disease, but there needs to be some type of fluid bodily contact, you know. You can't just get it by touching someone or you know.
Right, so don't exile the continent, don't cut off travel, that kind of thing. How do you see your responsibility as Poet Laureate? Once you really assume the job in 2015, is it to go around the city to try to get young people to vote in the next elections?
Of course I want to get the young people to vote, and I feel weird saying young people because I am one of those young people. But it's also to let them know that we hear them and that they're here and that we know that they're here. I think it's very important to educate them because sometimes they don't know what's going on. Sometimes they feel that they're not important. I know that when I was in high school, I felt like adults looked down on me, that they didn't talk to me, they talked at me. And I think it's really important because everyone goes through this stage of life. Everyone is a teenager and goes through becomes an adult. So why exile them almost? You know, why make them feel othered?
And I understand you're going to do one more of your poems for us called Evaluating Black Privilege.
Yes.
That's a thing, Black privilege? Black
privilege, as I say in my poem, is a myth. I often have conversations with people talking about their privilege, and then they feel the need to tell me about my I have privilege. You know, I'm a walking human being. I can walk. I'm not in a wheelchair. I do have a privilege, but I don't have privileges that other people may have. And
let's hear the poetry version.
Yes. On evaluating Black privilege. Black privilege is the hung elephant swinging in the room. Is the memory of a slave ship praying for the Alzheimer's to kick in. Black privilege is me having already memorized my nephew's eulogy, my brother's eulogy, my father's eulogy, my unconceived child's eulogy. Black privilege is me thinking my sister's name safe from this list. Black privilege is me pretending like I know Trayvon Martin on a first name basis. It's me using a dead boy's name to win a poetry slam. It's me carrying a mouthful of other people's skeletons to use at my own convenience. Black privilege is the concrete that holds my breath better than my lungs do. Black privilege is always having to be the strong one. It's having a crowbar for a spine. It's fighting even when you have no more blood to give. Even when you have lost sight of your bones, even when your mother prayed for you, even after they prepared your body for the funeral. Black privilege is being so unique that not even God will look like you. Black privilege is still being the first person in line to meet him. Black privilege is having the same sense of humor as Jesus. Remember how he smiled on the cross? The same way Malcolm X laughed at his blood, and there I go again, asserting my Black privilege, using a dead man's name without his permission. I can feel his maggots congregating in my mouth. Black privilege is a myth, is a joke, is a punchline. Is that time a teacher asked a little boy what he wanted to be when he grew up, and he said alive. Is the way she laughed when she said there's no college for that. Ignorance is the only thing that won't discriminate against you. Is the only thing that don't need a tombstone to learn your name, and it's tiring, you know? For everything about my skin to be a metaphor, for everything Black to be pun intended, to be deaf and tended. Black privilege is the applause at the end of this poem. It's me giving you a dead boy's body and you giving me a 10. It's me being okay with that. And I tried writing a love poem the other day, but my fingers wouldn't move. My skin started to blister like it didn't trust me anymore, like it thought I'd forsaken it for something prettier, something smoother to wrap around my bones, like I was trading in my noose for a pearl necklace. Some days I'm afraid to look into the mirror for fear that a bullet George Zimmerman its way into my chest while I was asleep. The breath in my mouth is weapon enough to scare a courtroom. I'll be lucky if I'm alive to make it to the stand. For some people, their trials live longer than they do. Black privilege is knowing that if I die, at least Al Sharpton will come to my funeral. At least Al Sharpton will mason jar my mother's tears, remind us that the only thing we are worthy of is our death. We are judged by the number of people it takes to carry our casket. Black privilege is me thinking that's enough, is me thinking this poem is enough. Black privilege is this breath in my lungs right now. It's me standing here with a crowd full of witnesses to my heartbeat.
Wow. So powerful, and speaks for itself, and incredibly powerfully delivered. Obviously, you come from not just the written poetry tradition, but the slam tradition, right? Delivering for audiences. Incredible.
Thank you.
A great job. Just very briefly, I understand you're a child psychology major.
Yes.
At NYU, so that's pretty different from being, say, a poetry major.
It is. It's very different. There's a lot of technical stuff, you know, statistics, math, you know, you need to know history of psychology, all that good stuff. Yeah, so it is different to know how children develop. So that's what I basically study, is the development of children.
Well, good luck with both directions, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And that's our program for today. We're here every week at this hour with a new show. Next time, the webcomic Strong Female Protagonist, also known as The Adventures of a Young Middle-Class American with Super Strength, Invincibility, and a Crippling Sense of Social Injustice. And speaking of just those qualities, tune into my daily radio program weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. Have a meaningful and happy Thanksgiving. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.